What does AI security theater actually look like in practice?
Right now, a lot of organizations are racing to buy AI governance platforms, but the real risk often sits in the unmanaged workflows, the browser extensions, the copied customer data, shadow AI.
We need to stop pretending that complexity is a reflection of how smart we are.
Now the AI is creating in new accesses and they're making over-permissioned data discoverable at machine speed, not human speed, machine speed. Almost every major breach that we've seen has passed a SOC 2 or a ISO 27001, whatever compliance framework you want to throw at it. Everyone's passed one and they still got breached.
A mistake that I see that leaders often make is buying into the problems that are being sold to you as problems, not the problems that you actually have in your business.
Any security leader should ask these 5 basic questions before they deploy any kind of new AI tool.
By the end, you know exactly what to cut, what to keep, and what boring but effective security program looks like in 2026. But first, if you're new here, welcome to Security Mondays. I'm Eva Benn, and every Monday morning I bring you some of the best global security leaders with practical AI security guidance you can turn into action this week. If that sounds good to you, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let's go, baby. Today we're breaking down what the heck is security theater and how to tell the difference between AI security spending that lowers your risk and spending that just buys you a nicer dashboard. But first, let's meet our guest. Joshua Copeland is a director of cybersecurity in Crescendo, an AI customer experience company where he runs the security program for a business built on AI. He also teaches cybersecurity, IT, and risk management as an adjunct professor at the Tulane University, and he's a deputy commander of the Louisiana State Guard Cyber Reserve. Before Crescendo, he led security operations and cloud security at AT&T and General Dynamics Information Technology. He also spent more than 20 years in the U.S. Air Force before retiring. A lot of you already know him. He's the voice behind the Unpopular Opinion series on LinkedIn, where he spent years saying the things in the industry most people won't say out loud. In September 2025, he turned that into a book. He has spoken in Black Hat, RSA Conference. He holds 9 cybersecurity degrees and 95 cybersecurity certifications. So yeah, the list goes on. He's truly an impressive guy, and I'm so grateful to have him here today. Let's just say he's the right person for this conversation. Welcome, Joshua. Let's go ahead and start with your book. You spent years posting unpopular opinions on LinkedIn, and if you don't follow Joshua, please do, because he's absolutely hilarious. Then you put all of that into a book called Unpopular Opinion back in September. So what is so unpopular about the opinions in the book? Who is the book for? Tell us a little bit more about it.
So the Unpopular Opinion is about a lot of what we call cybersecurity is really more performance art. We built an entire industry that is very, very good at producing dashboards and maturity scores and audit artifacts and tool counts and board-friendly confidence, but none of that automatically means that we're reducing risk. So the book really isn't anti-framework or anti-compliance or anti-tool. It's really anti-theater. So it's about asking whether things that we're doing would still matter if there was no audit, if there was no board deck that we had to present, if there was no, third-party questionnaire that we had to fill out, and no logo to collect to put on our resume or our company's website. As far as the audience, the book is really for security leaders, practitioners, executives, and honestly, anyone who's tired of pretending that activity equals progress.
You caught my attention because you talk about things that everybody's thinking, but nobody has the guts to say out loud. And I respect you for that. So you co-wrote a piece called Cloud Security Theater about Azure best practices that looks great in a board report, but don't actually prevent or stop attackers. And now you run security at AI companies. So can you bridge it back to the unpopular opinions and the security theater? Can you walk us through what does AI security theater actually look like in practice?
AI security theater looks like buying confidence before you actually understand what the problem is. Right now, a lot of organizations are racing to buy AI governance platforms and model training tools and prompt security tools and shiny dashboards without first answering the basic question: what is AI actually being used for? What data is being exposed? Who can connect to it in our business system? What decisions is it influencing? What breaks if it behaves badly? So the appearance of security is actually pretty easy. You can inventory sanction tools, write policies, and put a few public LLM sites and block them. Buy a platform that gives you a risk score and says, you're a B or you're, a high security posture. But the real risk often sits in the unmanaged workflows, the browser extensions, copied customer data, shadow AI, the API integrations, employees pasting sensitive content into a system that nobody reviewed, because everybody has a cool cell phone that it doesn't matter what I block on the corporate device. They pick up their phone, hop over to ChatGPT, type it in, and then copy and paste it to an email to themselves. So a concrete example most citizens would recognize is that a company bans ChatGPT in policy, then they roll out Copilot or Gemini, depending on if they're a Microsoft or a Google shop, and without doing any of the hard work for permission hygiene. So now the AI is creating and new accesses, and they're making over-permissioned data discoverable at machine speed, not human speed, machine speed. And that's not an AI problem alone. That's years of bad identity, bad data governance, bad access control suddenly becoming searchable in your entire environment and making the problem exponentially harder.
Lately, because I was at RSA this year, and the floor, this is going to sound a little bit controversial, but the floor did look to me like a security theater. It's almost like we're at this carnival and with the shiny object. So it reminds me a little bit of the Emperor's New Clothes, where everybody's racing to bring the shiny tools without really recognizing what's the problem we're trying to solve in the first place. So really appreciate your work and speaking out loud on these things. What is a security leader or a CISO? What would they ask a team before they approve a new AI security tools? If we have to be super practical.
Yeah, I would say that any security leader should ask, these 5 basic questions before they deploy any kind of new AI tool. First one, what specific risk does this reduce? Not what category is it in, what Gartner box can you put it in, not what does the dashboard produce, but what failure mode does this make less likely and less damaging? Second, what decision will we make differently because this tool exists? If the answer is we have better visibility, that's not enough. Visibility does nothing to change action if it's just surveillance with a nice UI. Third, what does it replace? If every new tool becomes additive, you're not building a security program, you're just building sentiment that things are good because we just added more stuff to it. Fourth, what data does it need? Where does that data go? Who can access it? And does the AI security tool become a new concentration point for sensitive data? Last one, how will we know in 90 days whether this worked or not? If we can't define what success metric looks like before buying it, we're probably buying a feeling and whatever the new shiny thing that we've seen at RSA, the product that's stamped with the new holographic logo that says now with agentic AI. So you should be able to leave the room with a clear sentence. We are buying this tool to reduce this risk by changing this behavior, measuring this outcome. And if you can't do that, you're buying theater.
Oh, this is music to my ears. I loved how practical and how simple you made it sound. It is simple, but it's not easy. And one thing to add is, I think a mistake that I see that leaders often make is buying into the problems that are being sold to you as problems, not the problems that you actually have in your business. There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of problems that we are talking about on LinkedIn and all over the place, but this doesn't mean that all risks are created equal for your organization. I always say that when people grab the agentic top 10, for example, this is not a one size fit all. You don't just go and try to mitigate all of these risks at the same rigor. So really good. Okay. So with the same piece, you actually said that passing a security benchmark, it's like acing an open book exam, which is yet another gem of yours. So where are you seeing compliance give leaders a false sense of security in AI-driven environments specifically? And what should they stop treating as proof that they're safe?
So compliance gives people a false sense of confidence when leaders treat it like the control as proof that the environment's safe. Almost every major breach that we've seen has passed a SOC 2 or a ISO 27001 or a NIST or an RMF or an insert whatever compliance framework you want to throw at it. Everyone's passed one and they still got breached. So in AI-driven environments, those gaps get even wider because the system is more dynamic and the evidence usually shows it. So things like a policy that says an employee shouldn't paste sensitive data into an AI tool doesn't prove that they're not doing it. It just proves that you had a policy. A vendor questionnaire that says we use encryption doesn't prove that the AI workflow is actually safe. An access review from 6 months ago doesn't prove that your Copilot or the Gemini or Claude or your Clawbot or some other AI assistant isn't now resurfacing new data that's sensitive today. The biggest mistake is treating compliance as the finish line. Compliance tells you what your documentation is, what your controls say you are. And sometimes it can tell you whether a control exists at a point in time. It doesn't automatically tell you that the control works under the pressure. It doesn't tell you whether people are bypassing it. It doesn't tell you whether attackers care that you passed, because I assure you they don't. They should stop treating policy, audit results, maturity scores, and vendor attestations as proof of safety. Those are inputs. The proof is whether the organization can stand a realistic failure.
I think that you've also said that controls that look like they're working on paper sometimes might actually add risk, not reduce risk, but also add it. Is there any examples you can give us on what could that look like in AI systems?
Yeah, I think one of the great ones is a overcomplicated access control that no one really understands.
Yes.
On paper, it looks super mature. In reality, you get exceptions piled up, shared accounts start appearing, admins stop reviewing anything carefully because controls have just become a maze, and you get the pressure to just make it work. Another is mandatory security training that is measured by completion rate instead of actually changes in behavior.
Yes.
You get a beautiful 98% completion metric, and you still have people handling credentials to fake login pages. Another one, alert heavy monitoring with no real response capacity. It looks great in a board report that says that you have total visibility, but if the alerts are unactioned, untrusted, they're buried in all the noise, the control's not protecting you. It's just documenting your failure in real time. So for AI systems, one of the big ones is having human in the loop as the magic phrase. Leaders love it because it sounds responsible. But if the human's overloaded, undertrained, pressure to approve, and unable to understand the model and the output, then a human's not doing any control. It's just a liability checkmark saying, I had a human look at this, not whether the human knew what they were doing or not.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have to say, all of these are so good. Everything that is overly complex is a security risk. We need to stop pretending that complexity is a reflection of how smart we are. That's one thing. The other, absolutely, this is a huge pet peeve of mine when we treat completion rate as security awareness and education success. This is, we need to actually measure what are the targeted behaviors that we are trying to change, get a baseline, and then measure those. And same for the humans in the loop. I think that core value proposition of utilizing agents and agentic workflows is to reduce the reliance on humans. So we need to balance autonomy and human in the loop, because there's the fatigue risk, right? Where if you have a human just clicking approve, guess what happened, right? It's basically as good as nothing. So these are so good. So we talked about that benchmark scores and maturity models and audit pass rates are not enough. So what should we actually be measuring? Let's give some examples on that. 2 or 3 metrics maybe.
Boards should be measuring whether security is actually improving in a way that affects business risk, not just what your score is on your attestation. So first, time to remediate meaningful issues, not the average across every low risk ticket, not the risk of critical exposure that could actually hurt the business. How long does it take to fix things that truly matter? Second, recovery confidence. Can we restore a critical system within a realistic time frame? More importantly, has it been tested? Who was in the room? And what failed when we tested it? Third, effectiveness of controls. Not do we have MFA? It's where is MFA not enforced? Where is it bypassed? How often do those exceptions get reviewed? Not a do we have an EDR? It's what percentage of endpoints are healthy, reporting, and covered. So the board should be looking at this for decision latency. When a serious risk is identified, how long does it take the organization to make a decision? A lot of companies don't fail because they lack information. They fail because they couldn't make a hard call fast enough.
Yeah. Wow. These are so good and so practical. When I hear you speak, this is literally music to my ears. So I hope everybody's taking notes because this is really good stuff. So you told Smarter MCP that you, and I quote, if you can't resolve a critical system in a realistic time frame, you're not resilient. You are lucky so far. So for a leader who wants to test that claim about their own organization right now, what's the exercise you'd give them to run, and who needs to be in the room?
So I would say try to restore a exercise on one critical system. Pick one. It doesn't matter which one, but it has to be a critical system. And don't do a tabletop where everyone sits around and nods and say, we followed the plan. Pick the system that the business actually depends on and test whether you can recover it inside the time frame that the leadership believes is possible. The people in the room should include security, infrastructure, application owners, business leaders, your legal team, your communications, and whoever owns the customer impact. If finance, operations, or customer support would be affected by the outage, they need representatives too. The exercise should ask, what system are we restoring? What backup are we using? Who has access to it? Are the credentials available if the identity system is down? What dependencies have to have before this can come back up? And how do we validate the integrity? How do we communicate the status? What's the actual recovery time? Not just what we have in the policy. The goal is not to embarrass anyone. The goal is to find the lie before the attacker does.
Yeah. Wow. And, I have to say one more thing here. You said the goal is not to embarrass someone. I think we need to get that ego culture out of the way, where we kind of like hold on to the idea of we have to be right. We have to get it right the first time. I think embracing a growth mindset and admitting that there is room for improve is the number one step to go from security theater to actually driving realistic outcomes. You've watched a lot of security transformations fail. You've talked a lot about this. What's the pattern that you continue to see that actually is the root cause of these transformations failing?
Yeah, so when you look at the public postmortems, they usually say the program failed because of budget or staffing, tooling, or complexity. And let's be real, those are real factors, but they're rarely the full story. The real cause is usually misalignment. Leadership wanted transformation without discomfort. They wanted better security without changing a business process. They didn't want to slow anything down. They didn't want to remove any risky exceptions or hold anyone accountable. So a lot of transformations fail because they start with tools instead of an operating model. They buy a platform, announce the program, build a steering committee, and then discover nobody agreed on who owned the risk, who can make decisions, what happens when security and revenue collide. The failure pattern is pretty simple. Big ambition, weak authority, unclear ownership, too many exceptions, and no appetite for consequences.
And honestly, I'm going to put leaders on the spot here for not asking the right questions. I see time and time again people celebrating wins right when they go and spend money. They're like, I bought this security platform, or like I paid out this amount in, bounty, or whatever it is. Like, that's not a win. You need to push for the actual questions that we're answering. How are we reducing risk? What type of vulnerability patterns are we targeting to reduce, and why? Like, these are the tough questions. We don't care how, right? We don't want to talk about the how. Ask the why. Why are we doing something? And then what is the outcome and how we're going to measure it? So lovely, lovely things so far hearing from you. So aligned on your thinking. So you were on the DNS Filter podcast, and I heard you say something describing this hero complex in security, where teams are under budgeted and everyone works past the normal day. And we know this, right? We always just have that one person, actually, all of us, we're glorifying the hero complex where everybody just jumps in, works overtime. How does this culture impact us and makes organizations actually less secure? And what's one thing that leaders should change about this?
So hero complex creates in and of itself fragile security. It teaches the organization that the answer to every failure is for the same exhausted people to just work harder. And that may get you through a bad week, but it doesn't build a defensible program. Burned out teams eventually miss things. They stop documenting. They normalize chaos. They become single points of failure. Worse, leadership starts mistaking the sacrifice for maturity. The team handled it becomes the excuse for never fixing the system that made the heroics even necessary in the first place. So one thing that leaders can change this quarter to start measuring and eliminating repeat hero events. Every time a team has to save the day, ask why. Was it missing automation? Was it bad ownership? Was it a broken handoff? Was it a system that nobody patched? A decision no one wanted to make? Don't celebrate the same fire being put out every month. Fix the wiring that's causing the firing in the first place.
Oh, so good. Build fireproof buildings instead of putting out fires. I use this all the time, actually. It's one of my favorite slogans. So one thing to also add for leaders is you have to model that behavior. If you yourself are embracing that hero complex and, constantly being plugged in, constantly working after hours, this is the behavior you're modeling for your team. And it's very hard for you to drive a healthy culture if you're not modeling it first. Let's just go. I want you, because you are so good at giving things to us straight. Can you tell me one brutal, ruthless thing that security leaders should stop doing immediately, and one thing they should double down on?
I think they should stop confusing evidence with effectiveness. A screenshot, a policy, a dashboard, a benchmark score, or a completed questionnaire is not the same thing as security. It may support the story, but it's not the story itself. Double down on validation. Test the control. Test the restore. Test the alert. Test the escalation path. Test whether the business can operate when something bad happens. Security leaders are often asked one brutal question more often than not. How do we know if this works? And the only answer is because the vendor said so or because it passed an audit. That's not good enough.
Wow. And because a lot of the times these audits, when I've been on the operations side, right? Somebody from auditing would ping me and just ask me for like a screenshot that we do pen testing. Like, I'm like, who cares? Like, doesn't mean absolutely anything. And you're going to put like a check mark on this. So in another podcast, you talked about organizations that say they do threat intelligence, but really all they have is just a pile of feeds, glossy reports, and alerts nobody really does anything with. So what does a leader have to do to simplify tool sprawl without losing visibility or control? What's the first cut you would make?
So start with the tools that no one can clearly tie to a decision. If a tool produces an alert that nobody acts on, a report that nobody reads, or a risk score that nobody trusts, that's your first candidate for removal. So the first cut, I would say, is make it duplicate visibility. A lot of organizations have tools that tell them the same thing from the same endpoint, identity, vulnerability, or cloud story, in just a slightly different way. That creates an argument instead of action. Teams spend time reconciling the dashboards instead of reducing the actual risk. So I'd map tools to three things: the risk they reduce, the decision they support, and the owner who acts on the output. If the tool can't survive that conversation, it doesn't belong. Simplification is not about having fewer tools for the sake of fewer tools. It's about reducing noise, reducing costs, reducing overlap, and most importantly, reducing confusion so that the remaining tools actually get used.
Simple is better. I always say that. So we've talked a lot about kind of the security theater. Can you paint me like a picture of a boring but effective security program, what that looks like in 2026?
I like boring security programs because they clearly haven't bought into the hype. So an example of a boring but effective program would have a strong identity. It would have enforced MFA, clean access reviews, patched critical systems, tested backups, and working endpoint coverage with reliable logging and a team that knows what happens when something breaks. It has fewer dashboards. It has more operating discipline. Assets or inventory is not perfect, but it's good enough to make a decision. Vulnerabilities are prioritized by exposure to the business impact, not just the CVSS score.
Yes.
Incident response is practiced, backups are restored, exceptions expire, vendors are reviewed based on actual risk, not just the questionnaire theater that we all do. It takes leadership to understand the trade-offs. Security is not, off in one corner begging people to care. It's connected to the business decisions, customer trust, resilience, and operational survival. Honestly, good security is often boring because the flashy stuff gets attention, but the boring stuff is what keeps you out of the headline and keeps your board happy.
Tagging on to this, you're running security inside an AI company, and there's a lot of hype around AI security. What is one AI security problem that you worry about every week that most security leaders still aren't talking about?
I think for me, it's worrying about AI collapsing the distance between bad data governance and real business impact. Most organizations already had messy permissions, stale data, redundant data, conflicting data, forgotten documents, overshared folders, unclear ownership of all the things. Before AI, that was bad. With AI, that becomes discoverable, summarizable, and actionable at scale. The issue is not just prompt injection or model behavior. Those things matter, they're important, but the bigger weekly concern is, what can AI see? What can it infer? What can it connect? And what can it cause someone to do? A lot of CISOs are treating AI as a tool category when they need to treat it as an acceleration layer across their identity, data, application security, vendor risk management, privacy, and insider risk.
So you're in a lot of rooms with other security leaders. Can you give us one unpopular opinion that you're hearing privately right now from people, but nobody has the guts to say out loud in the conference stages?
I think privately, a lot of the conversations from security leaders is that we know that we're losing the simplicity battle. We keep adding tools and frameworks and dashboards and workflows, exceptions, committee, AI-powered everything, agentic things. Many of the programs are not becoming more secure. They're just becoming just harder to understand. Mm-hmm. The things people say quietly is that security stack has become so complex that even the security team can't explain what is actually working,
True.
What's overlapping, what's broken, and what's just there because someone bought it 3 years ago and we just keep renewing it year over year. Nobody wants to say that on stage because it sounds like admitting failure. But it's not failure. It's just the first honest step at fixing your program.
Yeah, and we keep throwing more frameworks on the problem. I feel like we've always, through years, we are like, oh, let's just create another framework, add to like the 10 others. It's quite interesting now, especially with agents. There's this ruthless race of who's going to come up with the best standards and who's going to set this for the next years to come. But that's not how it works, really. I think it's about self-reflection. It's about looking at your own program program, what matters to your business, and try to kind of, not get the hype swoop you away. Joshua, I've absolutely loved chatting with you. This has been an amazing episode. I always like to leave leaders tuning in with something to do this week. So for somebody who is listening to this on their commute to work this Monday, what is one thing that you want them to start cutting today from the security theater? What should they be doing? If there's one thing they should absolutely do today or this week?
Pick one control that everyone assumes is working and validate it. Don't start with a new framework. Don't start with a new tool. Don't start with a 90-day strategy deck. Pick one thing that matters and test it. Can you restore from a system? Does MFA actually cover what you think it covers? Are critical alerts reaching someone who can respond? Can we find all the internet-facing assets? Can we revoke asset access fast enough when someone leaves? Can our AI tools access sensitive data that they shouldn't? Fastest way to cut the theater is move from we believe to we've tested. One validated truth is worth more than 20 polished slide decks.
All comes back to the good old basic boring fundamentals. Layering sexy AI tools on top is just going to exponentially expose you to more risk instead of reducing the risk, as many vendors are promising you. Well, Joshua, thank you so much for being here today. That was an incredible episode. I really hope that you took notes. Rewatch it again. I'm going to link all of the contacts of Joshua in the show notes. I really hope this was helpful. Please give us a thumbs up. It really helps the show. If you have a question or a comment, please leave it below. I read all of your questions and comments and respond. And I'll see you in the next one.